Entitlement on steroids. And I don't care how many movies you've made. I don't care how much money you've made. Right is still right and wrong is still wrong. And I hope they go medieval on these people.
It is Thursday, March 14th. At least one school says it is ready to take action in that college bribery scandal as this incredible story continues to develop.
That's right. But after millions of dollars in bribes and bond money, was all this really worth the price of admission? Plus, a major impact on air travel this morning after President Trump grounds all Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes.
Yeah, the urgent warning and safety concerns for travelers that led to this alarming about-face. And the question America is waking up asking themselves this morning, at least some people, what is Beto O'Rourke's dog thinking?
We always wonder what our dogs are thinking, but we've got your theories about what's troubling Beto's best friend. Fox and Friends First continues right now.
Act in this case, and it just seems to me that the FAA and Boeing sat around the table and failed to act in the best interest of the American people because they took action only after a public outcry.
And Boeing saying today they are going to support the president's and the FAA's move. So now back to the passengers. There are some options for you out there. Most airlines will let you rebook or request a refund. You can also try to rebook on a different airline. You just have to make that phone call. By the way, United said it's actually been preparing a contingency plan since Sunday's plane crash. They've been trying to prepare its fleet to minimize impact to its customers. Ralph, Jillian? Better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Aisha, thank you.
All right, Fox News alert and breaking overnight. A New York City mob boss is gunned down outside of his home. Gambino family leader Frankie Cali shot several times in Staten Island. The gunman sped away in a blue pickup truck and is now on the run. It's unclear if this was actually a mafia hit job or just a rogue gunman. Cali is the highest-ranking mobster killed in New York City since 1985 when John Gotti ordered the murder of Gambino boss Paul Castellano. What a story.
Cameras will be allowed inside the Chicago courtroom later this morning when Empire actor Jussie Smollett appears. He's expected to plead not guilty to 16 felony counts. Smollett accused of staging a phony hate crime on himself. Empire's first episode since his arrest aired last night. Smollett's character was front and center. He's been written out of the final 2 episodes of the show.
All right, the president threatening to veto the resolution to end his national emergency declaration.
We'll see whether or not I have to do the veto, and it will be, I think, all very successful regardless of how it all works out, but it's going to be very successful.
Today's the day. Just hours from now, the Senate will begin debating this issue. 5 Republicans have said that they'll side with Democrats, but we'll see if that's changing. We're going to get the very latest in a live report from Griff Jenkins in Washington in about 30 minutes from now.
Well, now it's that story that everyone is still talking about. The University of Southern California will review applications of students involved in the largest college admission scandal in U.S. history.
Actress Lori Loughlin, Aunt Becky, charged for bribing that school, is now out on bond. That's her daughter. Todd Pyro joins us live with the latest developments on all this. Hey, Todd.
Hey, guys. A huge response from USC, one of the big-time schools targeted. A spokesperson writing, "We are going to conduct a case-by-case review for current students and graduates that may be connected to the scheme alleged by the government. We will make informed, appropriate decisions once those reviews have been completed. Some of these individuals may have been minors at the time of their application process. Applicants in the current admission cycle who are connected to the scheme alleged by the government will be denied admission to USC. All this as actress Lori Loughlin is released on a $1 million bond following her appearance in federal court in L.A. The Full House star, along with her husband, accused of paying $500,000 in bribes to get their daughters into USC, passing them off as rowers, even though it appears they've never picked up an oar. Senator John Kennedy says the scandal is endemic of a bigger problem of the middle class getting hurt.
This is some of the most odious, vile, repugnant, reprehensible conduct I've ever seen. We look around and we see too many undeserving people at the top cutting corners and getting bailouts, and too many undeserving people at the bottom getting handouts, and we're playing by the rules, and we get screwed every time.
Laughlin and her husband, along with another actress accused, Felicity Huffman, scheduled to face a Boston judge on March 29th. We'll see if prosecutors call the children involved as witnesses and what impact that has on any deals those parents might make. It's one thing when you're charged. It's another thing when your kids are charged, as we saw with the Michael Flynn situation. People act differently when their kids are involved.
Absolutely.
And there's no better opinion on Capitol Hill than John Kennedy for any story. Todd, thank you so much.
Yeah.
He does, yeah.
Paul Manafort slapped with new charges after being sentenced to 7.5 years behind bars. The former Trump campaign manager just indicted for mortgage fraud, conspiracy, and falsifying records in New York. The announcement coming less than an hour after a federal judge sentenced him to 43 months in prison for illegally lobbying in Ukraine. Last week, Manafort was sentenced to 47 months for fraud.
Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross is going to be grilled on Capitol Hill Day. The House Oversight Committee demanding to know why the Trump administration is pushing to ask, are you a citizen in the 2020 census? The hearing comes just days after a second federal judge has ruled that the question violates the Constitution. The Supreme Court plans to take up that case next month.
The Senate is expected to vote on the Green New Deal this month. Republican senators say they expect Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to bring the resolution up for a vote on March 25th. That's when the Senate returns from recess. The proposal, spearheaded by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, strives for net zero greenhouse gas emissions. The vote will not pass.
It's going to be interesting, nevertheless. All right, a powerful bomb cyclone, Bombogenesis, packed with heavy snow bearing down on the central U.S. right now. That storm turning deadly in Colorado, where Corporal Daniel Groves was hit and killed trying to help a driver in blizzard conditions.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And take a look at this.
Wow.
Winds in Texas so powerful, a semi-truck flipped on the highway just right on its side. The weather canceling nearly 600 flights in and out of Denver today.
Janice Dean is tracking the storm. She joins us now. Such wind with these things.
The great blizzard of 2019.
Yeah.
This was historic. 103 mile per hour peak wind gusts. And it did bomb out. That Bombogenesis, it dropped 33 millibars in less than 24 hours. Incredible. This will be in some of the weather books. Taking a look at it, you see when it got really wound up yesterday. It is now lifting across the northern plains and parts of the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes. So it's starting to weaken a little bit. But man, this was quite a storm. Still wind gusts in excess of 60 miles per hour across the Great Plains. And we are still dealing with blizzard conditions as well. So blizzard warnings in effect for parts of the Rockies up towards the Midwest. Then the flooding concern, and we had tornadoes yesterday. So an incredible storm system. The severe threat is going to move across parts of the Mississippi River Valley, the Ohio Valley. This will mainly be a wind threat, but we are going to see, the slight threat for tornadoes, but incredible throughout the afternoon and this evening. We're still going to be dealing with this storm system. Eventually, it lifts up towards the Great Lakes and into Canada. But again, in terms of meteorology, this thing was incredible. It was like a hurricane.
It's a hurricane. Yeah.
It's like
snow.
Different dynamics, obviously, but a hurricane across the plain states.
It's just
unbelievable. Incredible. Yeah.
Hopefully everyone remains safe out there.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thanks.
You got it.
It is just about 11 minutes after the hour. An illegal immigrant with 9 ICE detainer requests now charged with murder. The police chief slamming California's sanctuary policies. Attorney Emily Compagno says he has every right to, and she joins us live with how this murder should have been prevented.
And is air pollution racist? The new study that has social media blowing smoke this morning. Stay tuned.
The city of San Jose and our police department has no control over how the county interacts with federal immigration enforcement and deportation of violent or serious felons. Those policies are not set at our level. This isn't about politics. This is about public safety.
The San Jose police chief slamming California's sanctuary policies after an illegal immigrant and admitted gang member with 9 previous ICE detainers is charged with a brutal murder.
Yeah, should stories like this be a game changer for sanctuary policy? This is the question this morning. Here now to weigh in is attorney and Fox News contributor Emily Compagno. Thanks for coming on, Emily. It's hard to reason around this. The guy had so many arrests and convictions. how do you argue against sending him out of the country when he's illegal?
I think it's impossible to be able to do that. And actually, the police chief said it best to me when he said, look, we have zero control. Both the city of San Jose and my police force has zero control what the county does in terms of its interaction with federal law enforcement and deporting these violent felons. I want to point out for viewers the fact that if he had been a legal citizen under California's current 3 strikes law, he literally would be in prison for the rest of his life. And yet, because of his illegal status, he was afforded basically the right at this point for the county, the city, to ignore the 9 detainer requests by ICE. And to me, the travesty is obvious with, unfortunately, that murdered woman.
That's unreal, yeah.
Emily, I'm reading an article right now about this, and it talks about, everything that the county could have done, but also saying that the county says that federal officials are to blame for this because ICE should have gotten a warrant here. What do you say to that?
What I say is that's 2 steps down in the procedure. So if they had responded to the retainer requests by ICE the 9 times, it wouldn't have had to get to the warrant stage. So to me, that's a little bit of pushing off of responsibility. I also point to the fact, too, that he had been deported in 2013, had been arrested and convicted multiple times, again, of violent felonies through these years. So it's not as if we're talking about a one-time slip through the cracks in the last month, and here's what could have changed that outcome. Also note for viewers that, I call them the 4 horsemen of federal prosecutions, but it's basically what makes up 80% plus of federal prosecutions, and it's immigration among them. The other 3 are fraud and drugs and firearms. So my point is that the DOJ and the U.S. takes it so seriously that it comprises among the majority of prosecutions, and yet counties are ignoring that to the detriment of their lawful citizens who are, as we see here, literally getting murdered.
Yeah, the police say that this guy was stalking this 59-year-old woman, eventually killed her. Let's take a look at what this young man was convicted of in the past. We've got burglary, battery of a police officer, trespassing, possession of meth, kidnapping. A lot of these are very serious crimes. And I know a lot of Californians, a lot of liberals will say, oh, well, if you're arrested for small things, you shouldn't be sent out of the country. But what we learned this week, or what we were reminded of, is that Californians are still pretty stiff on the death penalty. We learned that through the Gavin Newsom situation. And you wonder, if you show them a case like this where somebody has convictions for violent crimes, I have to think most people in California would say, get him out of here. What do you think?
You would think the rational ones would, yes. And also, it's important that in terms of the differentiating factor in a lot of California's laws, and also in the conversation, is really that violent propensity, right? It's the violent charges, the violent convictions. So I agree with you that here, that's why in part it's so egregious. Not only were there violent convictions, but there were multiple, again, over the last 5 years. So absolutely, you would think here there's literally no argument whatsoever. This is not protecting a family who has come across the border seeking a better life with an innocuous history.
Somebody with a traffic ticket or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Emily, thank you for your time.
Thank you both.
All right, 18 minutes after the hour. The fallout for flyers, for travelers, after President Trump grounds those Boeing 737 MAX jets.
America's most popular airlines use the aircraft. So how will this affect travel? The founder of Travel Pulse weighs in next.
Are working very, very hard right now, and hopefully they'll very quickly come up with the answer. But until they do, the planes are grounded. The safety of the American people and all people is our paramount concern.
Okay, so the president officially halting the flight of all Boeing 737 MAX jets in the U.S. after 2 fatal crashes.
But America's most popular airlines use the aircraft, so how will the ban affect travelers? Here to weigh in is the founder of TravelPulse.com, Mark Murphy. Thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. And this is something that concerns everybody. So do you think this was the right call, and what should people know?
Number one, if you don't know what caused the crash, you definitely want to be cautious because you're putting people's lives at risk. So I think it's a prudent thing to do. We saw that happen with the Dreamliner when they had the battery issue. Those planes were grounded for 3 months. And at the end of the day, it did not impact travelers very much because they were able to shift other equipment onto those routes. And so always err on the fact of safety. Interesting enough, we didn't hear much from pilots of the planes. We heard from the Airline Pilots Association, but I thought it was interesting that we didn't really hear from the pilots complaining about, boy, I don't want to fly this plane. So it's kind of interesting how it's evolved over the last few days.
Let's look at a couple of graphics here to show the countries that have suspended this. A lot of countries at this point. The U.S. was basically the last to do it. And then another graphic here shows the airlines that are affected here in the U.S. Southwest, American, United. Only about 70 jets overall. It's a very small percentage of the jets that fly. But the issue here, if you look at the Lion Air flight, apparently is in some sensor on that flight that told the plane that it was aiming up when it wasn't. And so it would correct the jet to start going down, thinking that it was correcting it to, you know, a flat flying. And that's scary. And the president says there's too much technology here, and the technology is what's killed these people.
Well, you know, it's interesting. A plane can literally fly itself. For the vast majority of landings, for instance, they're automated landings, but the pilot's there as a backup to it, right? So the key is whether or not the pilots that are flying the planes have the hours in the air and if they've been trained properly on this newer jet, because the weight distribution of the engines on the wings is different because these planes can go further, so they're configured slightly differently, and also that software, MCAS, that will allow that plane to self-correct. But if there's a sensor issue and that pilot doesn't override that, and the plane's automatic pilot features take over, that seems like what we're seeing here, but they haven't put the two together completely yet.
Mark,
but that's why they believe it.
Hey, Mark, real quick, because we're running out of time, I'm just curious, for the folks at home who may be, you know, they have flights today or tomorrow in the next few days, what is your advice to them? What do they need to know this morning?
Well, number one, they don't have to worry about those planes flying. They're not going to be flying. Number two, if you're on American Airlines, it's 1.2% of the total fleet. So it's not a big issue. I think Southwest is the biggest with about 4% of their total fleet. So you're talking about a tiny number of flights are impacted. And it's typically routes like New York to Miami if you're on American, or flights on Southwest to Houston, for instance, or to the Caribbean. So it really depends. It's like I pulled out of Mexico. There's plenty of aircraft to substitute in.
Okay. Mark, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
25 minutes after the hour, President Trump could issue the first veto of his presidency as Republicans holdouts say they still won't back him on the border emergency.
But Vice President Mike Pence says it's time for them to listen to the border agents on the front lines. He sat down with our own Pete Hegseth,
where the people wearing the green uniforms of Customs and Border Protection have told us that they need a barrier to do their job and to do it safely.
And guess what? We woke him up early. Pete is here live with the interview you will not see anywhere else. Good morning. How are you? After President Trump suspends the planes, Southwest, American, and United are among the airlines impacted, disrupting travel for thousands of passengers. The order coming after two jets crashed in less than a year, killing hundreds of people.
Actress Lori Loughlin, Aunt Becky, released on $1 million bond. She's the latest charged in the college admissions bribery scandal, the biggest one in U.S. history. Loughlin and her husband accused of bribing the University of Southern California into admitting their daughters as part of the rowing team they had never rowed.
And today, the British Parliament will decide whether or not to delay Brexit. The decision coming hours after lawmakers voted not to leave the European Union without a deal. Right now, the UK is scheduled to break with the EU on March 29th.
Back here domestically, the fight over President Trump's national emergency declaration coming to a head today. Just hours from now, the Senate will consider blocking it.
And if they do, the president is vowing to veto. Griff Jenkins live in our nation's capital as the president makes his final pitch. Good morning, Griff.
Good morning, Jillian and Rob. The Republican-led Senate is about to issue a stinging rebuke of the president's border declaration, and he is warning senators on both sides of the aisle that they're making a big mistake voting against him, and he's found his veto pen.
Anybody going against border security, drug trafficking, human trafficking, that's a bad vote. We'll see whether or not I have to do the veto, and it will be, I think, all very successful regardless of how it all works out.
And Vice President Pence touring Customs and Border Protection's training facility in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia yesterday, sending a message to Republican senators. Some, like Rand Paul, are feeling the pressure, telling the Washington Post if you see anybody that's got blood dripping out of their ear, they may be changing. But as it stands, 5 Republican senators are signaling they will vote with Democrats to block the president. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, Tom Tillis, and Mike Lee. Now, Lee attempted a last-minute compromise with a proposal allowing the border emergency to go through and adding separate legislation putting limits on future presidents' use of emergency declarations, but it was shot down. Meanwhile, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is bringing the pressure too.
You ought to stand up to fear. Do the right thing no matter who is in the White House. Our Republican friends know the right thing to do. They should not be afraid to do it.
Now, it appears a done deal. It only takes 4 defections to block, which means they've got 1 to spare. But you never know till it's over in Washington anymore. There are not enough votes to override a veto, by the way. Rob, Jillian?
Okay, Griff, thank you.
Let's talk about this for a second. Vice President Mike Pence and Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen pleading with Congress to approve the president's declaration.
Fox and Friends weekend co-host Pete Hegseth went one-on-one with both of them in West Virginia. He joins us now with a look at these exclusive interviews. Hey, Pete.
Yeah, morning, guys. I mean, they both went down to the Advanced Training Center for Customs and Border Protection. Clearly a symbolic move to say this vote is about border security. We don't have the wall. Congress hasn't delivered it. And the frustration with the Senate, with both of them, is that they feel like they're overthinking the vote. This vote is about delivering on what is clearly increasingly a national emergency. The vice president, we sat down in the woods, which is an appropriate place in this training facility, to talk about the border wall. This is what he had to say.
The funding the president requested throughout the government shutdown, the funding that we're appropriating now under the law through the national emergency, is all funding that the Department of Homeland Security told us that they needed to construct a physical barrier, a wall in 10 areas of high-density population where the people wearing the green uniforms of Customs and Border Protection have told us that they need a barrier to do their job and to do it safely.
Yeah, guys, go ahead.
I was going to say, you wonder where this message is getting lost in translation, because these are Border Patrol agents. These are people who see this day in and day out saying we need this.
Yeah, it's because it's become partisan. It's become about the president's wall and his priorities and his prerogatives. We had a chance to follow the vice president yesterday, watch him interact with agents who clearly believe we've got this crisis, not just a national security one, but a humanitarian one. But it's become partisan. And we got a chance to talk to the Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and she said this should not be about partisanship.
Congress continues to fail to act. This is not a partisan issue. It's not partisan to want to protect communities. It's not partisan to want to secure our border. It's not partisan to want to secure our homeland. And yet, in this environment, Congress refuses to act.
That's the frustration, is the emergency gets declared when the folks who get the votes won't do something about it. And if you're the commander-in-chief and you're looking at the problem, eventually you step in.
These 5 are starting to bend, or at least that was the reporting from the last 48 hours, that maybe there won't be a veto here.
The vice president was on Capitol Hill. Yeah. He had a clear message, see on Fox and Friends, a clear message for Republican senators. If you don't vote against this, if you don't vote it down, you're voting for open borders. You're voting to not fund the border wall. Good luck going back to your state and explaining that to your constituents.
Have an answer to that in 2020 or 2022, whenever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, so check it out on Fox and Friends.
Yep, on Fox and Friends. Pete's full interview with the DHS Secretary airs this morning on Fox and Friends at 7:30, and his one-on-one with Vice President Mike Pence airs at 6:30 and 8:20. Pete, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Good to see you. See you later.
35 minutes after the hour, kids in elite schools who didn't deserve to be there, all because their rich and famous parents paid the way.
So here's the question. Should the students be punished? Our parent panel is in studio to weigh in next. And welcome back. Full House star Lori Loughlin is out on a $1 million bond, and she's just one of the high-profile parents charged in the massive college bribery scheme that has also her fashion designer husband and fellow actress Felicity Huffman looking at very serious charges. But what about the kids in this? Our parent panel joins us live now, and that includes author of Disconnected, How to Reconnect Our Digitally Distracted Kids, Thomas Kersting, New York City Councilman Joe Borelli, and attorney Keisha Hebben. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. Thank you. You know, Thomas, I'll start with you. What do you make of this? Because as of right now, we don't have exact confirmation for all the kids involved, whether or not they knew about this. So let's start with, if they did know about this, what do you think should happen?
Well, I mean, if the kids know about this, first of all, that's really the parents' fault, that they led them down this road. And in the opening lines of this segment, we talked about the kids really being the victim, and they are. And the problem societally that I see from working at a high school and as a private practice therapist is that there's so much pressure on kids nowadays to get into these blue chip colleges. And it's one of the reasons why we're seeing so much anxiety and problems. You know, I can tell you that from having worked in a high school for so many years. And, you know, I'm kind of glad this happened, to be honest with you, so the cat can be let out of the bag. And those kids that are sitting on the sidelines not getting admitted to the colleges, and meanwhile they have the credentials, perhaps will get into these colleges in the future. Let's take a look, Joe, at some annual tuition costs for some of these colleges involved, and they're pretty big price tags here. You've got Georgetown, $53,520, Stanford, over $50,000, University of California at Los Angeles, just about $43,000, University of San Diego, more than $50,000, University of Southern California, $55,000, University of Texas at Austin, $35,000, and Wake Forest at $52,000, Yale at $55,000. I mean, these are some hefty price tags, and unfortunately, there were some hardworking kids who missed opportunities to go to some of these schools because these other kids were given those slots.
Well, that's really the problem. This confirms a really nasty idea about class in our culture, in our country, and it's something I think most of us thought and suspected actually happened. I mean, you look at some of those colleges, and they're elite based on the reputation of their student body, and the unfortunate thing for the other students that go to those schools, whether they made them or not because of this whole controversy, is that now the idea of whether these schools are that elite, that worth the money, are even called into question. That's sad.
Yeah, it is sad. Let's take a look at the statement here from USC that came out, and it says, we are going to conduct a case-by-case review for current students and graduates that may be connected to the scheme alleged by the government. We will make informed, appropriate decisions once those reviews have been completed. Some of these individuals may have been minors at the time of their application process. Applicants in the current admissions cycle who are connected to the scheme alleged by the government will be denied admission to USC. Keisha, I want to go to you, especially with that last part, with the students who are currently involved in that, process of trying to get into school. Say, for argument's sake, they didn't know about this. They didn't know what their parents are doing. Is that fair to just deny these kids acceptance?
Well, I think that if they didn't know, there's two parts. So whether they should continue to be in the school, unfortunately, I think they should not. If they do not have the qualifications, they cannot score high enough on the SAT or the ACT, and do not have the grades. So it's fair is fair, because there's a criteria that everyone must follow. But I do disagree with the children being victims if they knew about it, because you would know if you didn't score high enough on the SAT, and you would know if you're not an athlete for the coach to be paid money to say, okay, this person deserves to, or we're recruiting this student, knowing that it's not true. So I think the students need to be held accountable if they're a part of this conspiracy.
So correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing you say is that my interpretation is it would be hard for the students not to know about this.
Absolutely, because, your child knows. I have a 15-year-old daughter. She knows if she's set for the SAT. So if someone's sitting for this exam, if the proctor's doing all these things based on being paid off, the student knows. And the students know the criteria of getting into these elite schools. So I think if they're 18 or older, they should be held accountable.
So raise of hands then, who thinks that the school should retest the students and then take it from there?
I agree. That's fair.
That would be a fair way?
Yes.
Okay, Joe, you jumped in first. Why do you think that?
Joe, we would all here, I think, do anything to benefit our children. I think most parents would. But when it starts to cross the line of criminal activity, most rational parents should start to realize that doing these things is actually not benefiting the child, and you wouldn't go to this length. I think some of these kids, the children of such wealthy people would have been just fine if they went to less elite schools that they could actually have earned their way into.
And the big let me just jump in real quick. So the other big overlapping problem here is, let's assume these kids, some of them did know about this. What are we teaching them in terms of their character and their ethics, which are, as far as I'm concerned, two of the most important things that there are that human beings can have.
Yeah, that's true. And final word is what do we tell our kids now? What do we go home and say, okay, you know, this is a teaching moment for everybody because the whole world is watching?
Right. Well, I had the discussion with my daughter last night, and I said, as you know, hard work pays off, and you do not make your way by cheating. Unfortunately, there are people who do that, but look, they got caught, and now their careers are pretty much ruined, so it's not worth it.
All right. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Very good discussion. We appreciate it. Joe, Thomas, and Keisha, have a good one, guys.
You too.
And it is about 15 minutes until the top of the hour, and you know what that means. It's time to check in with Brian Kilmeade to see what's coming up on Fox and Friends. Good morning.
I wish you gave people time to answer if they actually knew what that means at 15 minutes before the top of the hour. Thank you very much, Jillian. And it's good to be able to look at you today, unlike yesterday when I had to stop myself from looking. When I did once, you rebuked me.
It's a fact.
More on that as the show progresses. We'll have that story, and if I can squeeze in some guests, we'll do it. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is going to be here live right in the 8 o'clock hour. Don't miss it. We're going to talk about maybe the next series of interviews from Bruce Orr that's now out to Lisa Page that's now out, all coming from the Republican House. What could be next out in the public eye, and what will we learn? Also, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich on what he thinks is happening on the Republican side as the president's about to get rebuked on his emergency action at the border. He'll use his veto, but the Republicans trying to send a message to the Republican president. We'll discuss that. Judge Andrew Napolitano on the Paul Manafort sentencing, and what was New York doing weighing in on it again, where they're not even asked or needed. Tomi Lahren will be here. She was at the border to a special on Fox Nation. She'll tell us what's at stake. And Dana Lash, she'll be joining us as well. It's going to be a big 3 hours. We're also going to talk about Beto O'Rourke and the Kiss Up article in Vanity Fair. Is he really sent from another planet to save us all? Can we indeed be saved? Do we need to be saved? We'll discuss all that and so much more. If we can squeeze it all in, we'll talk about this whole Jillian catastrophe, as well as urging everybody out there to please get dressed while you watch us. You don't have to be dressed while they talk, but while we talk, yes.
Out of The Godfather, a reputed New York City mob boss gunned down overnight outside his home.
So was this a mob hit? Robert Moses from our Fox affiliate in New York is live near that home in Staten Island. Good morning, Robert.
Jillian, Rob, good morning to you. This killing recalls a much grittier, more violent era in this city's history. Police are still here at the scene on Staten Island, a very Tony neighborhood at that. You can see cops have focused their attention on that area up the hill from where we are. Shortly after 9 last night, police tell us that 53-year-old Francesco Calli, better known as Frankie Boy, was shot brazenly multiple times in front of his home. He was taken to a hospital and pronounced dead. He is a reputed Gambino crime boss. Cops have been combing this area for evidence all night long. Calli may also have been run over by a blue pickup truck in addition to being shot, but so far cops have not confirmed that part of the story. An autopsy is scheduled to be performed today. So far, police have not yet made any arrests. They have also not released a description of who they're looking for. I mentioned that this recalls a more violent time in our city's history. Well, Calli's murder is the highest profile killing of a Gambino boss since Paul Castellano was shot and killed outside of a Manhattan steakhouse back in 1985. Interestingly enough, Castellano once lived about a half a mile away from where we are this morning. Again, no arrests so far in the killing of Frankie Boy Calli here on Staten Island. Jillian, Rob, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Robert.
All right, the air that Americans breathe isn't equal. This, according to USA Today article citing a study finding that there's a race gap in pollution, and it has social media and Donald Trump Jr. responding.
Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7 Sirius XM 115. Here with what you're saying online, Carly, I did not wake up this morning thinking we would be talking about race and pollution.
Yeah, that's right. So this USA Today piece is really all about air pollution through the lens of wealth inequality. So it claims that white people buy more stuff, thus creating more air pollution for minorities living in inner cities. Here's a direct quote. It says, Black and Hispanic Americans bear a pollution burden. Non-Hispanic whites whites experience a pollution advantage, meaning they breathe about 17% less air pollution than whites cause. Well, this piece not sitting well with Donald Trump Jr., who tweeted, "Just when you thought you've seen it all, now we have racist air. This insanity has to stop." Well, his tweet sparking a wave of negative reaction. One person, Clayton, on Instagram says they are spewing lunacy in their attempt to divide America. Another Instagram user says they must be running out of things to be offended by. And Sel also on Instagram chiming in saying, "Dear Lord, what will they come up with next?" So it's clear that some people think this piece is silly, but the co-author of it says that pollution inequality is very real and it's been going on for about over a decade.
Interesting. Okay, so this next one. Rob thinks that dogs don't have thoughts. I disagree, and everybody wants to know what the heck Beto O'Rourke's dog is thinking.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of buzz around Beto O'Rourke today, as there are reports that say he is ready to make his presidential announcement. And he also landed a very fancy cover, Vanity Fair magazine, but it is his dog in the corner of the magazine cover that is stealing the show on social media. Everybody wants to know what his dog Artemis is thinking, and Jillian, I agree with you. Dogs do have very deep thoughts, I'm sure. John on Twitter says he knows exactly how badly Beto's presidential run will end. Uh-oh. Another tweet similar to that. The dog is Beto from the future, trying to warn him not to do it. And lastly, David says, "I've made my 2020 decision, and I'm writing in Beto O'Rourke's dog." So a lot of conversation around that cute dog right there.
I think dogs have thoughts. I just think it's very simplistic.
Food.
Whereas I think cats are thinking, how can I kill you and still get fed?
Yeah.
That's what I like about cats. They're evil. All right, and early risers are happier and more successful people. I strongly disagree.
That's really good news for our viewers, guys. So this new study finds that they are happier and successful people. Early birds also more likely to be married with kids, earn more money. They're happy, friendly, and confident, have high quality sleep, and participate in active hobbies.
How's your high quality sleep going, Carly?
Well, I think that waking up at 1:30 midnight is more like just this time frame that nobody should ever wake up. And I don't know if that's really early. So this is very good news for those that are starting your day with us. If you're ending it with us, we still love you. That's okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. 6 a.m., 5 a.m. maybe, not 2 a.m.
Yeah. That's just going to bed real late.
That's right.
Yeah.
Carly, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
It is about 6 minutes until the top of the hour. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
But this video might be priceless. It's a great wipeout caught on camera. We'll show it to you coming up. Welcome back. The ACLU calling on local police to limit their partnership with ICE. The group says more than 9,000 federal immigration agents have access to high-tech license plate readers, which can scan 30 plates per minute, and the ACLU says it gives the feds access to too much sensitive information.
Critics are demanding that a county board stop praying before meetings. A newly elected official in DuPage County outside Chicago says the practice is not inclusive and that ending prayers is the, quote, right thing to do. The county board will vote on the issue at the end of the month.
Church and state. Time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. We start with the good. Freebies and deals for Pi Day today. Restaurants and stores celebrating March 14th, or 314, which is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. Today, you can get a slice of key lime pie at California Pizza Kitchen, a custom pie at Blaze Pizza, or a cheese pizza at Villa Italian Kitchen for just $3.14. Not bad.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Next, the bad. A woman calls 911 when she spots a teenager going crazy.
911, what is your emergency?
Yes, ma'am. I'm calling because there's someone up in front of our house. We just drove home, and he's yelling and screaming and, like, flailing his arms.
Turns out the 17-year-old Cleveland Browns fan was just celebrating his team's trade for OBJ.
He went nuts for it. All right, finally, the ugly. A college basketball coach lets all the excitement of a big win get the best of him. Nebraska head coach Tim Miles celebrating a win over Rutgers. We got to go. See you later.